This video is brought to you by Harold Sack, who gave me a massive 1 year's worth of subscriptions on Patreon. Sidar Jabari versus Zedruu, Kynaios and Tiro, and Balmor. One that I've been meaning to build for a while now and finally getting round to it. Effectively a one-lander is an easy mulligan. Gonna struggle with mana in an Esper deck at the best of times. Now we've got a couple of ramp pieces but no creatures to equip them to. Yeah, we're gonna have to ship this one back as well, I think. Which means going down a card, annoyingly. Well, we've got some cheaper creatures there at least, so hopefully make use of the sword, keep that. And we'll get rid of Lochthwain Lancer because Raise the Palisade may well buy us some time later. We do need to be hitting our land drops. Ideally we would play and equip the sword straight away. There is a 2-mana creature, so plenty of creatures to equip the sword to at least. Let's go for a Tricycle land, still hoping for more lands here. If we can get at least 3 we can play and equip the sword across 2 turns. Collected Voyage from Kynaios and Tiro, so we'll assume that this is a group hug deck if it's got cards like that in there. Alright, yeah, there are 3 other decks at the table that are going to struggle with lands, so I'm actually not against this. Yeah, we don't spend any mana and we do manage to search for some basics. There's a decent number of them in the deck. Maybe not as many as there should be, but we get to ramp ahead a fair amount here. Alright, so we want a plains and go for black because we've got a black creature in hand. A Paradox Haze means an additional upkeep for Zedruu. So thanks for that ramp. Unusual on turn 1, we actually get to play our commander here, so I might as well get that down. Hopefully get into another land, then we can play and equip the sword and keep the lands up. Drew into Cavalier of Dawn, which is some nice removal on a knight for us. Another commander in Balmor Battle Mage. And an Electrostatic Infantry. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, it gets a plus counter, and it has trample. And the 3rd commander in a row. I dare say we'll see Zedruu next turn as well, unless he decides to go for a board wipe and hurt us. We don't have a land to put out into play with Kynaios and Tiro, so we'll end up drawing a card here, which means we will get closer to a land. Alright, and there is Ancient Tomb, so can definitely afford the Sword of Hearth and Home. And we were right in thinking that we'd see 4 commanders in a row. Noteworthy that he didn't keep up any coloured mana, so we'll assume that he's not aiming for swords or generous gifts or anything like that after the mana crypt has come down. Instead deciding to use that mana to crack the Myriad Landscape and get some more colours in. Alright, some protection for us in the form of a Fierce Guardianship. So drop the land, go for the Sword of Hearth and Home. And then we could blow up some stuff here with Cavalier of Dawn. It does make us a target, but there's plenty of white in play, so I'm assuming that removal is going to be in the form of swords and the like. So maybe we'll be able to just hurt our opponents with the form of Cavalier of Dawn a few times, because obviously we're going to be able to flicker it with the Sword of Hearth and Home, so let's swing straight down the middle at the group hug player. Don't tend to leave group hug players alone. Drew into a Rift. Looted away the Cavalier so that we can reanimate it when we hit with the commander. And I think, actually, to put this on the stack, we need to target the Cavalier, don't we? So, yeah, we actually have nothing to target at the moment, but hopefully next turn we'll be able to start doing that if we keep our board intact. So, Sidar going to bring a 5-mana knight into play for free, and let's blow up the Zedruu. And we'll get an island into play with the Sword of Hearth and Home. So then we could cast this. Maybe blow up the Paradox Haze. I think we'll hold off a little bit. Yeah, I think we'll just leave it there. Balmor's up to 6 mana already thanks to the early ramp. A freeze in place taps a target creature with 3 stun counters on it, so that goes on Kynaios and Tiro, which does make a good blocker. So it's +1 on everything from the Balmor on attack, and then a counter with the Dwarf. Broker's Veteran after that. When it dies, a shield counter on a creature you control. And a Water Wings. Until end of turn, target creature is a 4/4 with flying and hexproof. That's fine. More buffs. So this has jumped up to an 8/6 with flying, hexproof and trample. The commander's a 3/3. Down to 2 cards there though, surprised at the lack of cantrips that we're seeing. The 8/6 goes in at the group hug deck as well. The 3/3 goes in over there also. So no one trusting Kynaios and Tiro as the group hug player. cultivate for the 4-colour player. Another card draw from the commander over there. And they managed to get out another land for themselves. A land over here. No additional lands for us. And the Izzet player with only 2 cards in hand, even if he has a land, I would take the card draw, and he does. We draw a generous gift. So getting into all of our interaction here. Now, Paradox Haze means an additional upkeep, which means potentially taking 6 from a mana crypt every turn. So as long as we can somewhat control this player, it may well be worth leaving the Paradox Haze alone. 10 mana for Zedruu now. So getting out Zedruu the Greatheart again. Followed by a Howling Mine, so we're seeing all the group hug stuff here. I mean, giving that away to someone obviously doesn't make any difference, which is why it's in the Zedruu deck. Alright, so we've managed to hold on to our board here, which is good. Hopefully draw into a land off the 2 cards on the top. Talisman of Dominance, almost as good. Alright, and there's a Tundra, so all the additional card draw helping us out here. So play the Tundra. And do we want to get down Exsanguinator Cavalry so we can get a plus counter on our commander? It's probably going to be a good idea. Maybe a plus counter on this itself. Yeah, let's go for that now. Play out the Talisman as well, I suppose. Or we could just discard this and reanimate it, couldn't it? So now that I've got the floating mana, I'll just play the Rider. Wasted some black mana there, but I don't think it's going to matter. Do need to make sure to keep something to discard to Sidar. So I'll go down the middle with the commander. The Cavalier can go to the right. And we'll be flickering the Cavalier again. So Sidar triggers on the attack and draws us into a Midnight Reaper I actually prefer than the plus counters, so let's get rid of that. That's some good board wipe, not quite board wipe protection, but that means of drawing even more than we already have upon someone casting a board wipe. Also cantrips this as well if we decide to use it. So no blocks being made, the damage just goes straight through, and we will target on the stack this time. Cavalier can get flickered, and Sidar only has 1 target to reanimate. And we do get to go for a land as well, of course, a plains, so that we can more easily hold up double white for the Guardian of Faith, which is going to help us to protect our board, like I said previously. Now the Cavalier, is this player going to scoop if we do this? Why don't we instead go after the potentially big trampler? Make a threat out of all of our opponents, apparently. And this pans out quite nicely for us. We can hold up both Generous Gift and the Guardian of Faith now that we've got the additional white mana, so fine to pass at that. Sword of Hearth and Home doing some nice work for us here. Was worried that this thing would often be too slow, but you have very few means of land ramping in Esper, and it's done very well for us here. Argument to be made for blowing up the Howling Mine with the Westfold Rider, but we'll leave it alone for a bigger threat, I think. Lamholt Raconteur now. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, 1 damage to each opponent. That is a werewolf. Will be 2 damage when it flips over. And with 3 cards in hand, holding up 3 mana and going through to the end of the turn. Amulet of Vigor, so there must be a decent number of lands in this deck. Maybe it's a lands matter list, and he uses group hug cards to get lots of lands out. Alright, a Genesis Wave where X is 5. I'm remiss to allow that, but yeah, for the fun of the game, let's just allow it and hope that we can still get rid of Kynaios and Tyro at some point. Not necessarily the wisest move, but it's not the biggest Genesis Wave either. Alright, got him into a Temple Bell for more group hug. A Dictate of Karametra as well, doubles up the lands of all of us. And then there's more card draw with Temple Bell. So we could actually go for Rift now if we wanted to. So do we want to put an additional land into play, or do we want to keep drawing cards? I think I'm fine with the additional lands that we're making off the sword and making a land every turn near enough with all the card draw. I think I'd rather just say no to that and get the card draw, especially when we have double mana in play. Got 11 mana available to us at the moment. Alright, and draws us into the infamous Hakon. Don't have all that many creatures in the graveyard at the moment, unfortunately, so don't have much use for that. But if we could get into a Lightning Greaves or something, a means of haste after a board wipe for Sidar, then yeah, that would be good. Noteworthy that Hall of Heliod's Generosity is in play here as well. Haven't had too many great utility lands in play so far. I suppose if we decide to get out Hakon, we could abuse the Westfall Rider and just blow up all the artifacts and enchantments. That would be more interesting than a Cyclonic Rift, wouldn't it? So there's Paradox Haze for the potential 6 life lost again, although it doesn't seem as though they've been bolted a single time yet. Here's a bunch of additional mana being tapped during the upkeep. Target opponent gains control of a permanent, so handing over the the mine to the player on the left, which doesn't really make any difference. And then we'll draw additional cards and gain life thanks to the Howling Mine being over here now. And then handing over a Paradox Haze to the same player is interesting. We'll still gain his additional upkeep though, off the initial trigger. So he's looking to draw a bunch of cards here. Do we just go for the Cyclonic Rift now before he draws into a counter spell? Hopefully we can counter a counter. Although there's untapped blue mana here as well. Maybe we just have to try and get it out of our opponent's hand. Yeah, let's go for it now. And we can still afford the Guardian of Faith if players want to use their removal in response to any of this. Alright, well the Rift lands amazingly, so not seeing any counter magic from our opponents. And a lot of the coloured mana has been used here, so it does somewhat hurt the Zedruu player if he wants to get his commander out again. We do miss out on a Howling Mine draw there, of course, but... Oh, actually, yeah, we obviously bounced the mana doubler as well, didn't we? So we actually can't go for the Guardian of Faith, can we? Tragic Arrogance we can counter with the Fierce Guardianship, so that's fine. Getting all our interaction out of our hand. But yeah, misplay by me, thinking I could hold up the Guardian of Faith. Obviously don't have the double mana anymore. Alright, and a Smothering Tithe, so further fixing the colours over there. I think that is worth a Westfold Rider sacrifice. We can only do it as a sorcery, unfortunately, so might as well swing in with it first, I suppose. Although we're going to draw a card to this as well, so the fewer treasure tokens we give this player, the better. Might just forego the extra 3 damage and sacrifice it straight after the draw step. Okay, another land for us and a treasure for our opponent. So we will sacrifice, go after the Smothering Tithe. That will draw us with the Midnight Reaper, which goes for the Smothering Tithe as well, so that'll be another treasure. Draws us into a Frantic Search, which is even more card draw, but it's obviously a loot effect, so we can load up the graveyard if needs be. Alright, so maybe we do start getting the plus counters on here finally, and it gives us blood tokens that we can discard things with. So let's get that down. And then we can reanimate, discard and reanimate Hakon, and then hardcast this. Maybe a couple of times. So I'm going to continue to threaten the Group Hug player. He will be out next turn if he can't do anything about our commander. The other two can go to the right. Sidar triggers on attacks, of course. So get rid of the Hakon we drew into Knight of the White Orchid. I'll have to count up the lands because I'm not sure how many we've got compared to everyone else. Alright, so it's Sidar on the Hakon. Sword of Hearth and Home. Yeah, does it just have to be on the Cavalier? I mean, what do we want to blow up? I don't really want to start going after lands, in all honesty. And we can target the... Is this? Yeah, it's up to 1 non-land permanent, so... Yeah, if we're not going to blow anything up, I might as well just untap this, I suppose. Because I don't want to give them any golems by destroying this if we don't need to. So, plus counter on the commander. Sword of Hearth and Home will flicker, as well as get us a land. So we'll just go after another basic swamp. Plenty of basics to go after yet. Hakon is reanimated, and then it's through to the second main here. Got this player down to 9. Alright, so we've got some blood tokens now as well. These are 1 tap, discard, sacrifice and draw. How many lands are there? 3, 6, 9. Yeah, so we could get out Knight of the White Orchid because our opponents do control more lands than us. They come in untapped with this, so might as well play it. Effectively only costs 1 mana, and that can be a scrub land for us. It's an alright flicker target as well. Means of ramping Esper on lands, which is, like we said before, quite good. Misty Rainforest is the land for the turn. And then let's replay a Westfold Rider and make the mana a little bit more difficult for Zedruu over there. That will draw us with the Midnight Reaper again. So we could blow up the treasures as well if we want to draw even more. A Clever Concealment with white creatures in play is excellent. So we're really, really doing well here. Yeah, so if we go for the Westfold Rider again, we can still hold up the Guardian of Faith. And we've got the discard fodder as well, so yeah, eventually we will leave it at that. Obviously could replay the Westfold Rider from the bin there, thanks to the legendary that we got into play previously. Balmor into play again after the Cyclonic Rift, followed by the Lamholt Raconteur again. So just having to set up after the Cyclonic Rift, as you often have to, before he starts dealing additional damage to us. Haven't seen a non-creature spell again yet. Broke his Veteran again. I'll crack the Misty Rainforest now. Doesn't look as though there's going to be Any Boros magic coming from over here. I want to get the double white in while we can, so we'll have to shock a Hallowed Fountain into play. And that way our opponent can't respond to a land being cracked or anything. We're at a point now where we could start looking at activating the Vault of the Archangel in order to keep our life total up there. Noteworthy as well, it's a little bit of a numbo. The plus counters on this with the flicker from Sword of Hearth and Home. We don't have too much flicker in here. That's really for the land ramp, like I keep saying, but yeah, the plus counter was knocked off this because we flickered it. It's noteworthy we don't have to flicker with any creature actually, so it might have been worth keeping this tapped while we didn't have to hold up blockers. The Dictate of Karametra going to make things easier for us again, so Frantic Search is going to ramp us nicely. Probably would have gone for Frantic Search before Guardian of Faith anyway. That would have been a means of getting the additional white we needed actually, didn't necessarily have to shock that in. Alright, floating a bunch of mana and then a turnabout, no doubt untapping all the lands. Vedalken Orrery allowing things to be cast at flash speed, so that might be worth throwing a generous gift at. Amulet of Vigour back into play. Starting to see why you don't leave group hug players alone now, because punch of mana along with Vedalken Orrery is scary. Temple Bell, see if he draws straight away. He does, so we all do. And a True Conviction is one of the means of ending the game. Alright, and there's a Blasphemous Act to try and wipe the board, so we will try a Frantic Search here. We'll still be able to afford the Guardian of Faith if it's countered or whatever. So we'll draw 2, discard 2. And alright, there's a Patriarch's Bidding, so even if the board does get wiped, we don't necessarily care. Get rid of Arcane Signet, and yeah, probably the land will be okay. We've got multiple means of getting lands into play now. Untap our jewels. And do we just go after Clever Concealment here? I think we're probably best trying for the Guardian of Faith, aren't we? We'll be able to go Generous Gift on the Vedalken Orrery, I suppose. And then it will get wiped out by the Blasphemous Act, the token that's left behind. Yeah, so let's go Generous Gift onto the Orrery. And we're going to have some surplus mana here, so we can put those into the blood tokens if needs be. I don't suppose we do need to, but let's just see more cards at least. Alright, a Winds of Change. Each player shuffles the cards from their hand and draws that many, so we're going to draw fewer cards here, but we'll get down another Knight. Alright, so that comes into play. Any number of other creatures will phase out, so might as well just phase out all of them. Noteworthy, yeah, I didn't realise, another bit of a numbo. This has Pro White, so we can't target it with the Guardian of Faith. I'll probably just let the commander go then, because we don't necessarily need to reanimate anything, I don't think. And it can loot from the graveyard, so we will phase everything else out. I suppose we could have left the Night Reaper in play as well, so that it would have triggered the Sidar. Or it would have triggered on the Sidar dying, and then we could have just replayed this with Hakon. Alright, Anger of the Gods, another board wipe in response. So, Clever Concealment then. Let's use the floating mana to go for a blood token. Do we just want to go Patriarch's Bidding next turn? I'd rather just swing in for victory because we're leaving this player alone for too long. Let's go Against My Better Judgment, discarding Raise the Palisade. Alright, into a Night's Whisper. We're not going to be able to... It almost didn't matter what we drew into there anyway. Let's go for the Clever Concealment then. And we'll just target everything in play now. Might as well. Can tap down our white creatures in order to pay for it. Alright, so that lands and we are actually able to phase out there, dodging a couple of board wipes and hopefully still get rid of the Vedalken Orrery. See the Is It players board go down. Yeah, this is why you don't leave group hug players alone. Still going to shuffle our hand into our library and draw 3 though, which is almost certainly going to be worse cards. Alright, not bad actually. Can refill our hand with that in no time, Pact of the Serpent, so yeah, Lochthwain Lancer is looking good as well. If our opponents are going to go after board wipes. Going to continue to do stuff at instant speed. 3 cards in hand with Generous Gift still on the stack. Ignatius Mastery is 6 into X. You draw 3 cards and then an opponent creates 2 treasure tokens and they scry 2. So they go up to 8 cards in hand but have had to use a lot of mana this turn. And hopefully are going to lose their artifact as well. May well have just drawn into protection for it. Alright, and an Arcane Denial to protect it, so we're going to draw a couple of cards off that as well. And the only creature going down to the act is the Lambholt. Our commander ends up back in the command zone. Kynaios and Tiro back into play, so we'll draw a card there as well. The instant speed, not as scary when they've only got 1 mana held up. but we're still going to have access to the double mana next turn, unlike during our previous turns, so we've really been helped along in this Esper deck. Alright, and the luck continues. We said before, when our commander comes down we want haste, so drawing to Swiftfoot Boots just in time. So the next thing on the wish list is a Cavern of Souls if this player is going to hold up blue mana. So we'll see what we get off the 2 cards from Arcane Denial. Well, we do get into a land. It's not a Cavern of Souls though. Suppose actually I put my commander in the command zone, didn't I, forgetting all about Harkon, so we could have just paid 4 mana to get it back out straight away. Losing an additional 2 mana next turn for no reason. But, like I said, thanks to this thing, hopefully it won't matter. A Mirror Maid going to copy something, maybe even more mana. And that means that when we take this player down next turn, we'll still have double mana available to us. Problem is, our opponents have full grips at this point. Alright, no, deciding on Vidalcan Orrery, so we've got 2 of those to worry about. Still deciding to play things at sorcery speed, although he had a mana float in there I think, so Ghostly Prism makes sense. And now should probably just pass through to our turn. So luckily we still have access to the Westfold Rider, which along with Harkon is doing some work for us. Don't suppose we even need to necessarily go for Pact of the Serpent at this point. Alright, so can we land our commander and a Swiftfoot Boots is the question, because if we can then reanimating this wouldn't be the worst. We'll draw even more when we sacrifice this at that point. But does that really matter? Do we just go for this now so that he can't as easily mess up with our combat? I think I will do that. Noteworthy that we're drawn into Knight Exemplar as well, which will give Indestructible. So lose a life and destroy something, as well as draw. And now our opponent doing something in response, maybe just getting the commander down again. Don't have any means of protecting our board now. That is a role reversal. Exchange the control of 2 permanents that share a type. So going to steal the sword away from us. I mean, we can blow that up as well. And that would normally be a sorcery, so casting it now in response to the orrery going down. Forcing him to use his mana though, like I said, he's not going to be able to interfere with us as easily during combat while he's doing this. Okay, Supreme Verdict blows up the board unfortunately. We'll draw some more cards, but yeah, maybe we'll get into the Patriarch's Bidding again. Don't think we've shuffled, have we? Although we did shuffle off the Winds of Change. So yeah, maybe it's on top. Yeah, he's yeah, you think he'd wait for combat. He's leaving this player in play in doing the Supreme Verdict. Although we could still go for the commander and swing in with the boots. Yeah, we can get 22 commander damage on him. Harkon, we lose 2 life when it dies, but we can cast it from the bin. And we can return an artifact or enchantment from graveyard to hand. The only thing we've got is the Arcane Signet, so we'll grab that. That is from the Cavalier of Dawn dying. And lose a bunch of life, draw a bunch of cards to the Midnight Reaper. Then Vidalcan Plotter in response. Exchange control of a land you control with a land an opponent controls, so we'll see what they grab here. We can tap it for mana in response, maybe they'll take the Vault. Taking away our Ancient Tomb, we tap it in response. This is during the main phase, so we can still make use of the mana, get 3 mana from that. And he gave us a basic island. There is the Cavern of Souls we wanted. Trouble in pairs, we're not having any trouble getting into card draw in this game, so won't necessarily need that. I do have high hopes of this card though, I'll use it one day. Alright, there's Murderous Rider as well. And an Acclaimed Contender, finally destroying the Orrery, I assume. 2 cards in this player's hand. Still going for something else after that. An Angelic Accord in order to make angels when he gains life. He did give us a treasure token, which isn't necessarily the best thing for him to give us if he wants to trigger his commander, because I will be sacrificing that just because it belongs to him. Alright, so it is Cavern of Souls, because I definitely want down the commander. Play the commander with the Cavern of Souls mana. Attempt a Swiftfoot Boots equip. Alright, and that is equipped, so we'll assume that we can get rid of this player with 22 points of commander damage. And we can discard something and reanimate the Cavalier of Dawn to get rid of the Ghostly Prison. Blow up the sword as well so that they're gaining control of fewer things of ours. Might as well just get down the Knight Exemplar, I suppose, while we've got a floating mana. So that will give our commander Indestructible, make it more difficult to get rid of. Now we are going to miss out on double mana here, so yeah, maybe should have got down Smothering Tithe or something by only tapping down 2 lands. Oh well, too late now. Go straight down the middle. And our opponent's got something in response here. That is a Reigns of Power. Untap all creatures you control and all creatures a target opponent controls. You and that opponent each gain control of all creatures the other controls until the end of the turn, so that is one of the few means of removing our creatures from combat. He's managed to save himself there. Does mean that we've got this double mana left though. Still get the trigger from Sidar. Draw into more means of indestructible. Discard a 5-drop. And we obviously didn't hit, so we don't get to reanimate anything here without Hakon. So in that case, we will reanimate the Hakon. Go for the Westfold Rider. Definitely want the Smothering Tithe in play by the end of the turn, so we'll play that now for 2 lands. Now we've got 6 mana left, so we could play this another 3 times. Blowing up this, and the sword might be a good idea. And then we'll get our creatures back at the end of the turn, so we've got a decent number of blockers. Yeah, let's go for the Orrery. Then replay the Rider. Go after the Ghostly Prison. Replay it again, destroy our own sword, because we're going to have a decent number of white creatures. And then, yeah, it's just going to have to be replaying the 2-drop again, I think. Maybe could have recast the Knight of the White Orchid just because it has First Strike. Again, haven't counted the lands, but maybe that would have been worth doing. Alright, we'll pass at that. Our opponents survive again. Noteworthy that we can now grab the sword back with the Cavalier if someone kills it off again. Balmor into play yet again. And then tapping down all his mana, throwing out a Mocking Sprite, making instants and sorceries cost 1 less. Followed by Storm Chaser Drake. When it becomes the target of a spell you control, draw a card. Cogwork Wrestler. Enters the battlefield, target creature an opponent controls, gets -2 to its power until the end of the turn. Not really all that bothered about that. Targets the Hakon with the debuff. A Lantern Bearer, just a 1/1 flyer. And with 3 cards in hand, deciding to pass at that. Balmor has had to set up his board over and over and over again. And we're in desperate need of getting a Vault of the Archangel trigger off. If we can manage to get a couple of treasure tokens here, we'll be able to hold up Murderous Rider, which may help us. Destroy a planeswalker or a creature with that. Decided to pay into the Smothering Tithe, curiously, so he'll have to be careful if he wants to activate the Temple Bell. But more big spells coming from Kynaios and Tyro, seemingly. So activating the bell again. And that draws us into a Gonjo. We draw, or our opponents all draw cards, so Smothering Tithe triggers a bunch, which switches on a Gonjo and the Swift End side of Murderous Rider. And now Krosan Grip goes on to the Smothering Tithe, so maybe our opponent didn't have that until he just drew the card. We'll likely still get the treasures here though. And if he's pointing it at Smothering Tithe, he's not pointing it at our Swiftfoot Boots at least. A Cleansing Meditation now. Destroy all enchantments. If 7 or more cards are in your graveyard, instead destroy all enchantments and return all cards in your graveyard destroyed this way to the battlefield. So he's got... yeah, 14 cards in the graveyard, definitely enough. So we'll get back the Dictate of Karametra, as well as any other enchantments that are in there. I haven't kept track of them all. So gets rid of the Angelic Accord, would always have got rid of the Ghostly Prison, and gets to keep the Dictate of Karametra, like I said. Curious that he decided to use his Krosan Grip and then cast this. It means that he could have gone after the Swiftfoot Boots if he'd wanted to. Vandal Blast will destroy each artifact, so... do we want to do anything in response to that? Looks like City of Brass is being tapped and may use the treasure token. Alright, a Dictate of Crucifix is more Group Hug. Again, that's a world ability, so it doesn't matter who has control of that. Suppose we might as well just use a Blood token, because there's nothing really to go after with Murderous Rider. I'm not going to use it just for the sake of it. So we do end up losing our Swiftfoot Boots here, unfortunately. May well draw into some kind of counter magic though. Let's go for sacrificing a treasure and a blood token. We can discard the Minas Tirith, I think. Alright, well, plumb the Forbidden. If we're going to lose the artifacts anyway, we might as well float the black mana if our opponent goes for a board wipe of some kind, or some kind of spot removal, then we can at least sacrifice it and draw even more. And our opponent is encouraged to keep playing during the main phase thanks to all the mana he's decided to float. Otherwise he could pass through to the second main and empty our pool before he carries on. We've only got one sack outlet in this deck in the form of a Knight. And there we go, a Cleansing Nova, so We're only going to lose one creature here, so I don't think it's worth going Plumb the Forbidden. Yeah, we'll just leave it, I think. Definitely be replaying the Knight Exemplar out of the bin next turn, so it can hopefully continue to save us from board wipes. Our opponent may well go for another one. Multiple board wipes in one turn here. Not sure what the actual aim of the deck is, in all honesty. Alright, Teferi's Protection buys him yet another turn, so he could continue to cast spells and get permanents down here, but they won't be protected anymore. And just passing priority, so we will do the same, not bother with Plumb. But yeah, the point I was making previously is with a sack outlet we could like consistently play and replay the Cavalier of Dawn from the bin with Hakon, but we've only got one of those in the deck, like I said previously. Hall of Heliod's Generosity is bringing back a Smothering Tithe back on top of the library before they draw into it. And we're going to have to start focusing on this player as well, seeing as how we can't get rid of Kynaios and Tiro apparently. Maybe we can draw into Moonshaker Cavalry off this. Another interaction I didn't think of is that this has flash. So maybe it's worth casting or having Vedalken Orrery in this deck as well. Or Leyline of Anticipation so that we can play things from the bin with Hakon at instant speed. But yeah, none of that in the deck. But this has flash printed onto it, so we could protect our board with a Guardian of Faith from the bin. Anyway, Smothering Tithe being cast by the Zedruu and has 2, 4, 5 mana left. No double mana thanks to this being phased out. We will draw a couple of cards during the draw step thanks to the dictate of... which one is this? Kruphix. Okay, a Roaming Throne will double up our triggers. Going to get multiple treasure tokens, so a Cyclonic Rift will be online for the Zedruu player. Suppose we just try and force the issue. Draw into a basic so that we can keep hold of a Gonjo if we want to. I think we might have to take this turn to go for that Vault of the Archangel trigger and gain a bit of life if the game is going to continue to go on. Depends how much excess mana we have this turn though. Play the Swamp. Cast so that it's uncounterable from the bin, a Knight Exemplar. Alright, that lands. Let's blow up that Smothering Tithe again, I think. Shall we do it with... I want to get down the Cavalier, but I don't want to put a Golem in the way, so... yeah, do we just go for this now before he gets even more treasure? We need to start dealing damage though is the problem. I think we'll give him another treasure. So we'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 mana left if we go for the Vault of the Archangel. Which means we can hold up the Guardian of Faith and recast this if we want to. Or do we just not go for the life gain and hope that we can get rid of this player with Acclaimed Contender and Moonshaker Cavalry? We actually couldn't afford the Cavalry with the Acclaimed Contender, so that scratches that idea. Let's just go through to combat then, I think. Can always decide if we want to go for Vault of the Archangel after the fact. See what they can do with all that mana and 2 cards in hand. Sidar triggers, and we draw into a land. We can discard. I think the Wintermoor Commander will be fine because we can hardcast it with Hakon easily enough. Draws us a card, so the Smothering Tithe will trigger. Looks as though we are going to land it, so yeah, 5 mana. Just hold up. Some interaction should be fine. Let's go for it. I'm going to regret doing it if I don't. Making sure to tap down the land I don't own in case this player bounces. So we'll gain a decent chunk of life here, assuming that we actually land these hits. Would have liked that True Conviction in play from the previous turn. First strike, hitting our opponent. Managed to hit our opponent, and we will grab a Lochthwain Lancer, I think. Cheats a decent amount of mana, but it also hurts our opponents if they wipe the board again. Alright, so getting him down to 17, we go back up to 30, which is much healthier. Yeah, no opponent owns more lands than us, so maybe get down this thing. And then we've just got more knights in play to start dealing more damage. Although we're shy on black mana for the Swift End then. Yeah, I'm just going to leave it. I'll hold up the Swift End, the Plumb the Forbidden, and the Guardian of Faith as well. Yeah, like I said before, could have gone after, maybe should have gone after the Smothering Tithe with that. They've only got 2 cards in hand, and I just want to try and keep bodies in play so that we can continue to make big hits. But with Dictate of Kruphix in play might not have been the best idea. I don't know, if he's just going to replay Zedruu and swap things around, then he only really benefits from that on the next turn cycle, hopefully by which time we'll have got rid of him. Difficult to decide whether or not to keep bodies in play or not. Another alternative would have been to get rid of Smothering Tithe with this and replay it, like we said we were going to originally. And then we still could have held up the Guardian of Faith and the Swift End. Wouldn't have been able to do Plumb the Forbidden as well though, but obviously we've got a full grip here, so yeah, maybe should have done that. A Hearth Elemental for the Izzet player. Looks like they only paid 4 mana for that, so got a 2 mana discount. And now with 3 cards in hand, this player is going to phase back in. Obviously we get the double mana back as well, so yeah, maybe never had to worry about holding up Plumb the Forbidden. And that player decided to scoop. Hasn't done too well all game, unfortunately, because it's been a very, very interactive one. And then each player draws a card to the Temple Bell, so Group Hug players starting to take over here. There's a Patriarch's Biddings, so maybe allow a board wipe to take place. Risky when we could get countered though. Be interesting to see if the Supreme Verdict over here previously ends up saving this player. Ends up having him win, because obviously we were looking to swing in over here previously. I can't remember if it would have been more than 7 damage or not, but he was saved by that Supreme Verdict potentially. A bounce land being played and untapped straight away from the Amulet of Vigour. The commander comes out again, easily enough thanks to all the additional mana. And then he's seemingly deciding to pass through the turn. It's noteworthy that he can play at instant speed thanks to an Alchemist's Refuge that came in a few turns ago. And we'll take the card draw on the commander again, which does mean more Smothering Tithe tokens, unfortunately. Alright, and there is a Path to Exile for the Zedruu. Another bounce land into play off the commander. So playing and untapping the Azorius Chancellor. Yeah, there's really no point in paying for Smothering Tithe at this point, because he's got a bunch of treasures as is. Don't think it's going to make any difference, especially not with double mana from lands. A Crown of Doom. Whenever a creature attacks you or a planeswalker you control, +2 to its power, and a target player other than its owner gains control of it. So that will go under the control of this player, surely. If it comes under our control, it doesn't really matter, because we're aiming to get rid of this player anyway, and it's irrelevant against the player who cast it. Although, is this going to get counter magic out of his hand? Tap blue mana and then decided to untap it. Not sure if that's a bluff or if he was actually considering a counter there. Knight of the White Orchid for some ramp, I'm assuming. More ramp with a Core Cartographer and a Humble Defector. Felwar Stone. 1 card in hand. And the last card in hand is a Venser's Journal, so gain 1 life for each card in your hand and you have no max hand size, ironically. Doesn't have any cards in hand. Have to assume we're going to see the commander here though. Okay, amazingly not seeing the commander for some reason. So let's go for finally this Swift End onto the commander over here, see if we can fish out any removal of any kind, or any counter magic of any kind. Looks like we are fishing out some interaction now. A Stroke of Genius, draw 6 cards in this case. So a bunch more Smothering Tithe treasures at the end of the turn. Alright, so that goes into the command zone. He's got 7 lands, which means 14 mana and 12 cards in hand. Suppose we just have to try and get rid of him next turn again, but not hopeful. Okay, there's a Sign in Blood. We'll draw an additional card to the Dictate. More Smothering Tithe triggers. May well have to take advantage of the double mana and then finally blow this thing up. Draws us into a land to make for the turn. So let's cast ourselves a Roaming Throne. I'm thinking that I'm going to... Actually, overpaying thanks to the double mana, forgot about that. Yeah, I'm thinking that we're going to go for the Cavalier again and start blowing up permanents that are an issue to us, so we'll make some double triggers here. That comes down as a Knight to double up the triggers. Might as well play ourselves an Acclaimed Contender, and that will trigger twice of course, so we'll get a couple of Knights here potentially. Alright, a Werefox Bodyguard is, yeah, another creature that it can exile. Medallion Wave Knight is plus counters, and Silverblade Paladin is double strike. Let's go for the Bodyguard for removal. And then on the other trigger it is Sky Hunter Strike Force. We'll probably play here, try and attack both players. And we're just clearly playing into like some kind of board wipe or something here, but I mean we need to try and get rid of both players, so I don't really see what else we can do. Yeah, do we just forego the double mana at this point and just cast the, what is it called, the Cavalier? Yeah, we'll just go for it now. So now our opponent is holding priority and may well want to see what we target before he goes for anything here. So go after the Dictate. Maybe it's a bit too late, but the Smothering Tithe as well. Alchemist's Refuge being activated before the double mana is lost. We'll still be able to float some mana in response if we're worried about anything our opponent's doing. So we'll be able to go like Hakon and replay the Westfold Rider and still get rid of the Dictate if we want to. Do have Indestructible on our stuff, don't forget. Alright, Teferi's Puzzle Box. That triggers at each player's upkeep, I think. Each player's draw step. Alright, so we're hoping to get rid of this player before then, but there's no guarantee. And then a Selfless Squire. Prevent all damage that will be dealt to you this turn. So he manages to survive yet again. But we will get rid of the double mana at least. I'm going to get rid of the Puzzle Box as well. He wouldn't have played that if he didn't want it in play, you have to assume. So not doing this during combat is good because it means that we can target this player. I suppose I should have floated some mana there actually. Yeah, I could have tapped down the Swamp or another white source and then we would have made 2 mana into the Werefox. Yeah, but as it stands now we can just go like that. And then we've got, yeah, just the Guardian of Faith held up but not the Path to Exile. We've got melee on a bunch of our stuff, so do we need to get down the Fox? I don't think we do. So we'll just use some of that black mana and we'll get down the Wintermoor Commander. So I'll turn everything in sideways to the right, apart from the Knight of Exemplar. And hopefully our indestructible creatures will survive and take that player out. Could have sent 1 creature in here just for the sake of melee, but yeah, I'm hoping it's not going to matter at this point. Do get double the triggers thanks to the Roaming Thrones, so it's +2/+2 on all of our creatures. Alright, and in response that player just decides to pack it in, so hopefully if there's any kind of damage triggers we'll still get those. I think they've actually fixed that on Magic Online. So if we were relying on lifelink or anything, then I think we'd still get the life gain here. Obviously our commander is actually going to reanimate some stuff here if we want him to. So let's just discard a Plains, and then draw and discard again. Is another land. And we should get the damage trigger, like I said, so our commander should reanimate something here. Okay, it doesn't, so yeah, our opponent's scoop in there is really not good. We would have been able to reanimate a couple of things here, but not able to. Hopefully it doesn't matter because we've got a bunch available to us anyway. So we're holding up protection and some removal as well. Let's go after the Teferi's Puzzle Box. And each opponent going to lose a life. Oh, actually, I totally forgot about our opponent losing a life there. We can just go for the Plumb the Forbidden then, can't we? And sacrifice all of our board. Yeah, should have thought of that before now. But this is the first time playing the deck. I've enjoyed it way more than I thought I would, to be honest. Oh, our opponent's just got a grip full of lands. That's really unlucky, all the cards he drew. Wow. But yeah, all we had to do there was go Plumb the Forbidden, sack. It would have been 3 more creatures, I think. 1, 2... Yeah, 3 more would have been 8 life that he loses. So, yeah, just sacrifice 1, 2, and 3 creatures, which adds credence to the fact that we should have a sack outlet or 2 more in the deck, so that we can abuse things like Hakon a bunch more. Yeah, something to think about, but yeah, really had fun with this Night Tribal list. And hopefully you enjoyed watching it as well. Big thank you to my opponents for actually playing it out for the most part, and huge thank you to the patrons for supporting as well. You can do that via the link in the description below if you would like. Gets you shout outs and your name in the credits. I'm Tribalkai. Thank you for watching.